Coming live from Edison, New Jersey, USA is our guest this evening. Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Jim Thompson, Chief Digital Officer at Modern Luxury, and he looks after the overall digital operations for the US largest luxury media company. He's also a journalist and a top podcast host, and there is a lot to learn from him. He's the master for us today. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you, AJ. It's great to be here. Appreciate the invite.
Thank you. So we'll be talking about knowing about real mentors in life. We keep on talking about mentorship, how people shape your life, work life, in other spheres of life. But to know exactly who is the real mentor, who can actually help you grow in the real sense, how you actually found out about yours. And that's about your journey, about a lot of things together, from being a journalist to from a media executive to where you are, and also about your personal journey. So Jim, first, to understand from you, what exactly do you mean, do you understand when you talk about a mentor?
Well, AJ, I think mentors are all around us, and so a lot of times we think about the famous people that we see in social media, and so like when you think about an Elon Musk, or you think about a Joe Rogan, or you think about these people that you see that we rely on for information and guidance, I think there is a whole world of wisdom out there that's locked up in people that are not famous. So the people that have never been on a TED Talk, are not CEOs, have not won awards, have not written books, but have a certain amount of real world wisdom that could be really beneficial to us. And so I think that one of the best ways for us to uncover those unfamous mentors is at the base of, or is based on one simple question. And that question is, if you asked anyone that you met or know, and asked them to really think about who was the most influential person in their life who's still alive today. When I ask people that question, they often struggle. They're like, well, I don't know. It could be, it takes time to think about that. But if I were to ask you that question, or if I were to ask one of your listeners that question, the person that they come up with is generally a very good opportunity for us to talk to, learn from, and extract knowledge that would otherwise be hidden. So that's how I think about mentors.
Right, Jim. And that's what you struggled with to find about yourself, about the one person that was alive at that point in time who had the most positive impact on your life. How did you actually come to this question? The most important part is, as in medicine, they say, is the diagnosis. And then you can always come to the cure part of it, prognosis, as they say. So in your case, what made you come to this question? Because by that time you had a good life. You already had seen life quite a bit. And then so that is why I asked, what exactly made you come to this question? And how did you come to an answer for this question? This may sound very easy, but actually, if I look at it and understand it, even from my perspective, it makes me go deep down within myself and a lot number of people I've come across in my life. So please, a bit of peep into what exactly it was that led to this.
Well, AJ, I think it's not unlike what a lot of people went through as we navigated COVID. right? We came out of COVID, and I think a lot of people thought, wow, I want to rethink my life. I want to rethink, what am I doing? What am I focused on? And I think as I came out of that, one of the things that I really focused or wanted to dedicate is, um, I try to stay healthy. I try to stay fit. I work out, but like, what am I doing up here? Right? How am I improving this? And that was really what came out of this. Was I wanted to really work on my personal growth, my personal development, um, and that muscle, the between my ears, is really develop that. And so that was, and I didn't know exactly what that meant. I don't know how I would accomplish that, um, but I think the opportunity for us to change our mindset is one of the most powerful things we can do. It's your master class, right? The ability for you to reframe and rethink about problems, opportunities in a different way is a huge opportunity for growth. So just coming out of COVID, I knew I wanted to really work on that element of it. And so it led to that. Well, how do I, how do I get to that? And then when I stumbled across that question, um, so I was kicking that idea around in my head around asking, who's the most influential person in your life that's still alive today? And so I went to dinner with my wife, and we're sitting at dinner, and I asked her this question. I'm like, hey, I'm kicking around this idea. If I asked you this question, what would you say? And she named, her aunt, who was really important. I'm like, okay, why that person? Like, what did you learn from them? And she started to tell me the story, and she starts to cry right there at dinner. And I was like, oh my God. I said, I'm sorry, honey. I didn't mean to do that. But it, it, it signaled to me like, oh, there's something here. There's something here around the power of tapping into that one person. And if I can tap into other people's one person, personally, I'm going to learn a ton of information. And so that's how I kind of came to it. Was coming out of COVID, realizing I wanted to develop my mindset, my personal growth, and two, what's the best way to do it. And this has, so that's why I started the podcast, and that's why I called it The Great Unfamous, because it's about understanding the greatness that lies within the unfamous people that helped us along the way.
After you recognized the real mentor in your life?
I did. And I did. I realized, I asked myself that question, and I said, who is that person for me? And it was difficult. There was several people that were really important and really either great role models or really impactful for me. But the person that stood out for me was an occupational therapist, a young woman at the time who was an occupational therapist who worked with my wife and I and our son, who was diagnosed with autism. And what I learned during that time with her was I entered this situation thinking, please, help my son, help me figure out how to help him, how to move him along and advance him. And what I discovered, or what she taught me, was that it wasn't about my son. It was about me. It was like, you need to become the person that your son needs. You don't need to change your son at all. You just need to become the person that your son requires at this time. And so she was she was the first guest, and the beauty of this question is that person in your life who was the most influential is very unlikely they don't know it. It's very likely that they do not know the impact they had on your life. And so when I called Alex and said, hey, I'm thinking through this idea, would you be open to talking about it? And then after speaking with Alex and having her as a guest, I realized how beneficial it was for both of us, for her to be recognized and acknowledged for the life that she changed. And AJ, I can tell you, if you've changed one person's life, you've probably changed more than one. Um, and so that's how I started along that journey of, well, who is that Alex Sullivan for AJ or for the other people that I know? And so that's why I approach the podcast in two sections. I interview the person, and then I interview their great unfamous. And so that's kind of how I started to step through this thought process and this approach to uncovering wisdom.
Right, right, Jim. And that's why, it's such a wonderful way you have put it. And this is for, a lesson, or gives an understanding to a whole lot of people that mentors are not somebody with whom we may be spending a lot of time. They have their own specific places in our lives, but the type of mentor that you are talking about is something much more deeper, something much more meaningful, and something which will happen uh, only you when you meet the right person at the right place at the right time. So is it a lot of people? Why I ask you is this, because see, by that time you had already worked with big brands, names like Gary Vaynerchuk, if I'm pronouncing it correct, his personal brand you people were managing, Billboard magazine, Hollywood Reporter, Vibe, all those big brands that you were dealing with, names you were dealing with. It is very easy to just get swayed by big names. Like in today's time, it's everything is online, and whatever happens online, then you consider, okay, this exists. If I and you don't exist online, perhaps we won't exist offline. Perhaps people won't recognize you, Google won't recognize you, nobody will there will be existence, but in true sense, the way we are moving, so a lot of people are influenced by that. And many a times they just considered, okay, this is my mentor, this is the one I will follow, this is the one which I got to be. Almost like a wannabe sort of a situation occurs with some people. And in real life they just tend to discard all the wisdom that the true people around you can be giving you all the time, thinking about your growth, working about your growth, impacting you to grow as an individual, as a person, as a worker, anything. So, how do you tell that, Jim, with all your wisdom of your life as a journalist and also as a podcast host of this sort of thing? What would you tell them? How exactly they should be going about looking at their mentors? Is it too late for them if they are 25, 40? Or is it that they have to be waiting for the right person at the right time?
Well, boy, I sure hope it's not too late, AJ, because I'm well beyond 25. So the look, I think the opportunity to think about mentors is, as I look back in my life and the people that were impactful, they weren't strokes of lightning, right? They weren't aha moments that happened in a flash. They were gradual realizations that happened over time. And so the people that you spend time with, um, I think those are the folks that if you pay attention, you're like, wait, what does it mean that this person gets up every morning and goes and does this one thing for and helps a group of people? Like what's behind that? And when you start to like look at um, the people who uh, the people who um, lift other people up on a regular basis and do it over time, those are the people that have figured something out. They've figured out how to move on to that next level behind. It's all about me and what I care about, what I need. And so, when you and I, when we meet and interview as journalists, some of the most important people or the most famous people, right? You forget that there's just as much value or even more value. So when you mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk, having worked with Gary for almost 2 years, if you follow him or look at what he does, he talks to everyday people
Right.
every day, right? And one, to help them, but also to learn from them and learn what people are struggling with, what are people excited about. And so he's constantly talking with uh, plenty of famous people, but way more everyday folks to contribute and to learn. So that's what I think. If you look in your life, there's probably um, 3 or 4 people that are excellent role models, and you should ask more about why they are.
Right. Right.
Because the other thing I believe wholeheartedly in, AJ, is that the thought that you are the aggregate of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So thinking very carefully about who you spend time with, because that impacts you more than anything you can imagine. Uh, and so choosing those 5 people and surrounding yourself with people that you admire, want to be like, respect, um, that's a really important thing as far as mentorship is, controlling those folks that you spend the most time with.
Right, Jim. And should it be about impact on your work life or impact on your life? Because work life can be also that somebody who pushes you to be better, bigger, may also push you into something which you may not, which you may not want from inside, but still you grow, and you achieve a higher place in that hierarchy of things that we have today. And there might be somebody who is your friend, somebody relative, somebody else, who just might stop you from doing something wrong in your life. How does one still make sure that this is the person, or is there still another filter at that level?
Well, I think your question is, how do I know when I have, the right mentor? I don't know if I know the answer to that question. What I can say is, number one is to be self-aware, right? If you're aware uh, of yourself and where you are, and you're trying to be honest about where you are and what you struggle with, what you're good at. I think when you come across other influences in your life, you're going to realize, like, do they help me advance? Are they helping me improve the skills or the relationships that I need to advance? Or, are they recommending a path that doesn't feel right to me? And so I think when you're self-aware and you start to realize, they talk about that feeling in your stomach, that it's something mystical. I don't. I think it's science. I think when you pay attention to, this doesn't feel right, there's probably a good reason. There's probably a good reason for that. And so I would say I always try to measure the folks I come in contact with and the influence they provide on me, and how does that feel? Does it feel like it's a positive, uplifting benefit to me, or do I feel like it's a drag and it's you know pulling me in the wrong direction?
Right, right. So now let's go to your podcast, The Great Unfamous, who change people's life, and they are the ones you try to bring and make them famous in your own manner. What do you actually aim to accomplish through this, Jim?
Well, um, there's a couple there's a couple different things that I hope to accomplish with it, or I think it does accomplish. Um, when you There's a specific reason why I talk about the most influential person that's still alive. Not that the people that have passed on were not influential or not important, but I think the opportunity for to extract value from that is far greater if we start thinking about the folks that are still around. So, I think the mentors that we come across in our lives, there's a lot of times the guests that I bring on, I will do the intro in front of them. So a lot of times in podcasting, you'll pre-record or you'll record that after the fact. I don't like to do that. I like to read that intro to them live before I interview them. And it's amazing to look at the response on their face, because most of these people who are unfamous, right, have never had that happen to them. No one has ever given them a 90-second intro that kind of sums up, why they're impactful and why they're important and why we're talking to them today. And it's really moving, because it's the kind of experience that people think they're going to get at their funeral. And so they're like, wow, I'm really blown away by that introduction. I'm like, it's all the truth. There's nothing that's in there that's not true. But most people do not take that time to look at their life in that way, and to have someone summarize it for them and say, hey, these are some of the reasons that you're really important and have helped other people. So you're right. They are, in a lot of cases, they're unfamous at the time, and maybe I'm trying to make them a little more famous. But the people that I've met through this, there's no doubt I never would have met them without this hack, right? Like the people that I've come across are incredible, that that people never heard of, that you wouldn't. There's a friend of mine, a CEO of a startup named Kate Bradley Chernis, and super talented, creative, clever founder. So she's kind of famous in her own right. She's done her own things. But then when I asked her who her influence was, it was her aunt. And I said, okay, well, tell me about your aunt, and why she was impactful. And this woman who went on to become to get her doctorate, Janet Hartnett, an incredible woman who, at the age of 30, lost all 3 of her children in a house fire. And I was like, oh my God, like, how do you recover from that sort of thing? And how she did it and what she did next. She ended up going back to school, getting her master's and her doctorate, and the Kennedy Fellowship in Congress. And she ended up founding the National Disability Foundation, which is amazing that someone could take something so terrible that happened in their life and turn it around and create something so amazing with your life. And that's a person I never would have met, right? I never heard of Janet Hartnett. But those people are all around us. That's not unusual. So I know someone who is relatively famous, and they connect you to someone who is super impactful that helped them get to where they are today. And that's really what the podcast is about, is finding these people, and talking to them and learning and sharing those lessons. So the reason for it is, A, there's a great learning opportunity. B, there's an acknowledgement opportunity, right? The ability for us to note and honor these people that make these kind of contributions, but they go unseen or unknown. And so just acknowledging them. And the third is, AJ, is it could encourage, and I'm hoping it encourages other people to do it, right? So if you and I talk and you talk about, a young high school kid that you influenced, and you realize how impactful that is, it's going to encourage you to do it again. It's going to encourage you to do it more often. So there's a lot of levels of benefit that come out of it. And so that's why I think this is a great opportunity for me to help, because I'm not special. I'm not that unique, but if I can be a conduit or a connection to this to this hidden wisdom, I feel like that would be a great contribution.
Right, Jim. That's what storytellers, that's what journalists do. They tell a
Mm.
story in the best manner possible without putting anything, any of their own views in between, but show it the way it is. And you just like you bring the mentor and the mentee together, and that is the time when you actually get to see the real stuff of life. And a lot of mentors would be not people who generally one think would be the ones who have impacted such big people or influential people's lives. Like there was, you told me there was this Bengali wise man from Rangpur in Bangladesh, one of the few guests, early guests that you had. What was that story about?
That that's the serendipity of who we come across. Um, a good I had shoulder surgery about 2 years ago, and my physical therapist, Mir Shatil, we just became really good friends because we were meeting, two times a week, and we were talking about all kinds of things. And he would tell me these stories about his grandfather back in Bangladesh, who is like a 90-year-old motorcycle riding grandfather, and he just always tells me these crazy stories about his grandfather. So when I asked him to be on the podcast, and he said that his grandfather was his greatest influence, I said, "Oh, well, that's too bad. Like he's in Bangladesh and doesn't speak English." I said, and I'm like, "You know what? No, we can figure this out." I said, "Let's you call him, you ask him these questions. We'll translate." And what we got from his grandfather was incredible. Like this is Aziz Rahman was basically like the village wise man. Like Mir grew up outside of Rangpur in Bangladesh, and his grandfather was like a village elder, or is a village elder. And what I didn't know is that in that setting, that village elder is a justice of the peace, a therapist, a teacher, a banker, and all the different ways that his father or his grandfather helped people and taught him how to treat people, was really enlightening. And to think, this is in a small little town of a couple hundred people, maybe 1,000 people outside of Bangladesh, in a world that I've never seen or have any familiarity with, but like the impact that his grandfather had on that whole village of helping people build homes that couldn't afford, sharing his land uh, to allow people to grow food who didn't have access to their own land. Um, uh, those lessons that Mir learned from his grandfather get reshared, get retold, and lived out in a different life decades later. And so the ability to hear the voice of Aziz and for him to be recognized, it was an interesting conversation to hear, because they don't normally talk like that. No one comes up to you and says, "You were important in my life for these reasons. You did these things and they were really important." People are taken back by that because it just doesn't happen. But the wisdom of a Bengali wise man was one of my favorite interviews.
I'm sure each of your episodes are great learning experience for a lot of people who can, consume that sort of a wisdom. How do people consume, uh, get to hear your podcast, see your podcast? What's the best way to do that?
Sure. So the podcast is on most major platforms, Apple News or Apple, Spotify. So if you just search "The Great Unfamous," you'll find it. It's I'm on Twitter and Instagram, so GR8 Unfamous. So that's on Twitter and Instagram. But and what I tell people is, like, look, even if you don't go to the profile, even if you don't follow me, that's fine. Think about the question. That's what I would ask people to do. I don't need to become famous, but I do need you to think about this question, because if you do, the amount of good that will come out of it is exponential. And it's, it's hard work, and it's nerve-wracking to call somebody and tell them what, we just don't take time to do that. It's not in our natural flow of things. And so, but if you put yourself out there, give this some serious thought, put yourself out there and let that person know the impact they had, because the impact of that will be tremendous.
How does it feel like doing an episode like this each time that you do, Jim?
It's funny you asked that, AJ, because sometimes I feel like this podcast is only for me. I feel like I do it because I enjoy it, because I get such a kick out of talking to these different people. Every time I put up an episode, it feels like I'm adding another little piece to a library of goodness, right? And so I hope 10 years from now I'm still doing this, and I've talked to 1,000 different people and shared 1,000 different stories. But it feels good. It definitely feels good, AJ.
Right. I understand it, Jim. And sometimes, as journalists, as a storyteller, you may feel that, these stories, some people will not like, or there'll not be many readers or listeners for this. But then stories are such. You never know who listens, who reads it, and that changes their lives. And even one life that changes makes it a life fulfilled.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jim, on coming on to the show. It was a pleasure talking to you, indeed.
AJ, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.